So thank you again for joining us. We are here today for emergency shelter best practices. Excited to have everyone on to learn. And we've been saying that everyone is in a busy season, but I think the last season was a busy season. So everyone is just really busy. We really appreciate your time to come and learn together today. Just a couple quick housekeeping notes as always. You're muted when you come on. If you're not, please go ahead and mute just so we don't have any background noise. Go ahead and add your questions in the chat box. We're going to have a couple of presentations to start, and we'll pause between them for questions. And then we'll have some panel questions, and we'll also just kind of keep an eye on that chat. So go ahead, you don't have to wait or stand on ceremony, just pop any questions in as they come to you, and we'll find some good spots to stop and do some Q&A. And then our meeting today is being recorded.
Volume. I'm trying to figure that out.
The meeting today.
Rebecca, I'll work with Steve in the chat.
Okay, thank you. We're recording today, and we will post up our meeting from today as well as the slides. So I know folks take a lot of good notes, but we'll also have all of the materials available for you. Just to note, we've got everything on this website. That's where we'll have things posted, as well as any upcoming sessions we have that I'll reference when we get to the end of our meeting today. We'll quickly introduce our panelists, and they will give us some program overviews. Again, we'll pause for questions, and then we'll jump into a panel discussion. Time for Q&A throughout. As always, we'll have a brief meeting survey at the end with a $5 drawing for a gift card for folks that respond to our brief meeting eval survey, and then we'll look at what's coming up. So I'm really excited to introduce our presenters for today. Cam and Bob come from the Dolores Project, and Cynthia from Volunteers of America. I'll let them introduce themselves more thoroughly and launch into a bit of an overview for their programs. So with that, I'm going to turn off my slides, and Cam and Bob, turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for being here. My name is Cam Carpenzano. I'm the Director of Strategy and Impact at the Dolores Project. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I will go ahead and let Bob introduce himself before we get started.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bob Schultz. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am the Assistant Program Director at the Dolores Project.
So I have a little bit, I'm going to share my screen with you. Essentially, I'm going to take you through a case study to kind of give you a program overview of what it is that we offer at the Dolores Project. This is a little bit longer of a presentation, so I will probably skip a few slides in there. But if you have any questions, please definitely drop them in the chat, and I will do my best to answer them as I go. So here's a case study. Jordan just kind of made up, but shares probably a lot of similarities with a lot of our folks. 29 years old, lack of relational support due to her LGBTQ plus status. She identifies as a trans woman. She's been living unsheltered on and off for 10 years after being kicked out of her family home, struggles with untreated PTSD and schizophrenia, self-medicates with other opioids and other street drugs, and has struggled to maintain employment. So Jordan hears about the Dolores Project from a friend who's staying with us. Word of mouth is really big in general and amongst the community. And she calls a shelter at 10 a.m. and learns that a bed is available. So we take intakes every day at 10 a.m. And we do that because we do have a 50-bed shelter, pretty limited capacity. And so instead of people walking up and, potentially wasting their time and going out of their way to secure a bed that is likely, when we're likely at capacity, we take calls instead to make it a little bit easier on everyone. So she gets a bed, and immediately upon entering shelter, she gains access to the following resources: safety, food, sleep, clothing and hygiene items, connection to a case manager, programming, crisis support, connection to a behavioral health counselor upon consent, and hopefully community and belonging. And Jordan is one of 50 individuals residing in thoughtfully designed congregate shelter space intentionally created to promote dignity, healing, and safety through a trauma-informed approach. The other guests have either come directly from the community or have been referred by partners such as the Department of Corrections, Denver Sheriff's Department, or Denver Health. All guests identify as women, transgender, or non-binary. Then initially in intake, we will go ahead and a resident assistant will schedule a meeting with a case manager. This is all optional engagement, but usually upon intake, in being able to make that connection and right away, we do see an increase in engagement in that regard. So we offer supportive services and stabilization. Jordan meets with her case manager the following day. Together, they complete a coordinated entry assessment in Colorado's HMAS One Home system and an Arizona self-sufficiency matrix. These are all kind of self-report assessments, and they prioritize individuals into housing essentially through the coordinated entry system. Transportation services, RTD bus tickets, and our transportation from our very own Betty White, which is our van. And so we're able to transport clients around if they need to go to, say, the DMV for vital documents. We also offer employment resources, individualized service plans, and connection to external agencies. So we do have different ways into housing, and I won't get too deep into specifics here because they are all honestly a little bit complicated in their own ways and have their own pros and cons. But there are 5 major pathways into housing through the Dolores Project, and that's our homelessness resolution prevention grant through our HRP funds, essentially. Our rapid rehousing program, a housing choice voucher, a project-based voucher, or affordable housing or private market. The path or paths that Jordan has access to is complex and influenced based on many factors, including but not limited to criminal background, rental history, and prior evictions, meeting all eligibility of the specific program or landlord, credit history and current score, current or past assets and income, and preferences desired or needed for disabilities. So we always like to take their preferences into account as well when we're trying to look for different units. So I'm going to go ahead and skip these. These kind of go deeper into the different types of housing, the funding sources, so forth and so on. But if you have any questions about any of those, please definitely feel free to put it in the chat. So then Jordan enters once Vital Doc ready, enters into our housing navigation. And so our housing navigator will work with Jordan to fill out a housing desirability form to determine what her housing preferences are. The housing navigator also assists Jordan with rental applications, budgeting, touring, landlord navigation, inspections, rental assistance contracts, and they also develop connections and rapport with different landlords in order to really serve our folks in the best way possible. Once housed, they have access, Jordan then has access to a continued care case manager where they can engage for up to 2 years if they'd like. It's again optional. If they're receiving rental assistance from us, they have to be engaged in the program and they can receive rental assistance for up to 1 year. Through that, they will work towards stabilization in housing, and they also have access to our behavioral health team as well. So that does not go away after the stay in shelter. They're still able to meet with their clinician if they've established that relationship with them on site. So that's kind of the quick overview of the continuum that the Dolores Project offers. Bob, I don't know if you want to add anything else to it. But yeah, there's quite a few programs, and it is very, very case specific to where the person goes on their trajectory in terms of housing.
I concur. It's good job. There's nothing to add.
All right, great.
Great. Thank you for that overview. I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but I'm sure they're coming. And we'll take a second to switch over to Cynthia's slide deck.
Okay, I will
Oh, do you have
start
more?
share.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to make sure you weren't going to a new slide. All right, we'll bring Cynthia up right now.
All right. Good morning. Can everybody see my little PowerPoint? Okay, wonderful. All right. Great job, Cam. That was lovely. Thank you for that. I am Cynthia Muro. So I am the director over here at Volunteers of America for the Denver area shelters. So that includes our lovely Irving Street Women's Residential Facility, our only HUD funded safe haven within Colorado, as well as Sinton's Sanctuary, which is our 25-bed shelter for unaccompanied senior women, 60 and better currently. And as well as Theodora Family Hotel, which I have chosen to highlight today. All of them are wonderful programs, but I did want to bring this kind of to you guys. And as you see here, I just wanted to kind of show you a little bit of this is the front of the building and the light, the show that you see at night. So if you're ever coming down Colfax, please do take a look. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. We started operations at this new site in May, so we really haven't fully hit a year at this new location. We have always had a family program operate off of this current location. We had two sides of the property. It's like a motel. It used to be the Aristocrat Motel. You guys, I'm sure a lot of you remember that. So back in 2024, we did, as a program, move to another site over on East Colfax, just temporarily, as our Volunteers America team and architects and construction folks built our new site here. So this program, we call it Theodora Family Hotel. It is very intentional. The design is very intentional, trauma informed. So everything, when you walk in the building and just even from the outside, you are able to identify specific pieces to trauma informed care. We have 60 rooms, and we are still located off of close to Colfax and Sheridan. 55 of those rooms are dedicated to families. 5 are dedicated to veterans, unaccompanied, single, or they're with their families. Okay. So we are an emergency shelter. So that we are an emergency shelter, but from a creative, I always say innovative, very creative perspective. As I stated earlier, it's 55 rooms for families. Referrals, the majority of the referrals do come from our city's emergency shelter system through the Salvation Army's Connection Center. So we are in partnership with them to bring in referrals. And that is for the family shelter component. We do have the ability to pull in internal and emergencies depending on, it's a case-by-case situation. We don't have a set length of stay. The initial, as folks do come in, they come in for 1 month. And then what we do is we meet as a team. We have a wonderful case management task force that meets every week to talk about every single family that we have and to see where we're at and next steps. So that's a wonderful thing to have. The veteran component, which is funded through the VA, is 5 rooms with 10 beds and serves military veterans and their families. The length of stay is definitely determined by individual case plans. So here, excuse me, the picture that you see here, these little cubbies in the back, those are really, really cute. Folks can just come in here at any time. This is part of the community space and just hang out in there, read a book, play on their phone. just really a nice space for folks to just come and relax. Here, you don't really see it. This is what we call the technology center. So this is really exciting. We just received our laptops to install a tech center for folks that do not have access into a laptop or internet. So our folks can come down here, do what they need to do, school, work, whatever that is needed, and the staff is here to support that. Supports do include safety and security, so we do have controlled access in that to the building. So our folks do have, upon intake, they are assigned a fob, so they're able to only access the building at certain locations and as well as the parking downstairs. So that's really, really nice to have so that we're not just having folks walk in randomly. And then our front desk is right there off of the front door. So then they're able to kind of see who's coming in and out. Obviously, assistance with daily needs, transportation assistance, RTD bus tickets, taxi vouchers. We do offer 3 meals a day, continental breakfast. We have a hot lunch and dinner. Obviously, crisis prevention, intervention, housing focus, case management, navigation, connections to legal aid, health and wellness services, education and employment services, resources tied through our housing focus case management. We very much, as I'm sure all of us do, believe in social solution focused interventions. So the goal is for us to ensure that our families are maintaining as well as working towards stability. Parenting and socialization classes. We offer resource fairs on site with some of our partners, volunteer groups and special events. As an example, today we are going to have a wonderful clothing closet event over here in the classroom with some volunteers helping out. Approaches, trauma informed. We focus on compassionate, participant-centered services, housing focused, and solution focused. The staffing, moving in to Theo, because of the number of rooms increasing, we do have a 1:30 ratio. We are 24/7 double staffed by guest services specialists. Those are our folks that are at the front desk, at the front line, working directly with our folks. 2 housing case managers, one of which is bilingual, a lead intake and referral specialist, and on-site center director, as well as a director, and 2 dedicated maintenance technicians, which is wonderful to have. And just to kind of close it out, since we began program operations here at Theodora, we have served 103 families thus far. We are always at full occupancy, so as a room becomes available, our maintenance and housekeeping team work very, very hard to get those rooms turned around and turned over back to us. That is our goal within 1 to 2 days, unless there's a huge maintenance concern. So we're hoping that those are captured prior to move out and resolved, so we can maintain that efficiency. Of those that have exited, 82% have done so into permanent or more stable housing solutions. So stability also can include moving along into a transitional housing program. Sometimes we do have folks that choose to go move in with, friends and families on a temporary basis. And we obviously support those decisions. So yeah, that is Theodora. Any questions?
Okay, I think Rebecca, are you okay? There we go. All right.
Just got it fixed. You all, all of my Zoom went to a black screen besides Cynthia's slide, and I could not unmute myself or do anything. So meanwhile, I was trying to log in under a different email on my laptop. So thanks for the save, Cassie, but it As soon as you stopped sharing, Cynthia, I was able to get back in. So crisis averted. Never a dull moment, guys. Um, all right. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Cam and Bob. That was great. And we have a yeah, Cynthia, in the chat. No other questions so far. So thank you all for sharing that.
I did have one question. Sorry, I thought of it later, if I
Go
might.
for it.
It's about the Dolores project. So, is it the same case manager that helps an individual from when they initially come into shelter through the up to 24 hours, sorry, 24 months of case management once they're housed? Is it the same case manager?
That's a great question. It is not the same case manager. We have our shelter case managers, and then we have our continuity care team.
Okay.
So we make it a point though that there is a warm handoff
Sure.
before going into housing so that they can actually start building that rapport prior to being
Sure.
housed.
Sure. I thought wouldn't it be great if we could have the same person, but I'm not sure any of us have funding that supports that. So that was my question. But thank you.
Yeah, and to go along with that too, we do a weekly or sometimes bi-weekly, depending on how busy it is, case conferencing. So with all of the case managers as well as the program manager. And so they're all pretty well up to speed on what's going on, with all of our entire population. So yeah, it might be a warm handoff with the client, but the case managers are all they communicate really well, take really good notes, and we have so they kind of know what's going on. They're not walking into that next. The case management side is not walking in blind, if you will.
Great. I'm seeing some nice notes of support in the chat for our lovely presenters. Any other questions right now? All right, we have a few ready. So our first question for our panel, what are some practical first steps that emergency shelters can take to shift toward a housing-focused approach? And we're going to go to Cam first and then Cynthia.
Sure. So there are a variety of ways I think that um, a shelter can start shifting into that modality. But I think the most important first step really is defining what exactly is a housing focused approach in the first place. What do we want that to look like? So in a lot of prior models, there was a lot of push towards housing readiness. And so there are a lot of staff who are trained on housing readiness. So I think it's really important to be able to talk to your team, to train them on what the housing first principles are, which is that it's a framework that prioritizes immediate access to housing without preconditions. And so with that training, hopefully there is additional buy-in from the staff so that they can start shifting towards whatever policies are then implemented after that and really have that buy-in to be able to say that this is something that we believe in and we're going to prioritize. I think the second biggest piece to it, and there are really large implications in general to shifting an entire model, but I think really reducing the amount of exits as well and trying to come up with additional interventions before ever getting to exiting, because it's what's the alternative? The alternative is somebody potentially just kind of going through the revolving door and coming back and hopefully they get housing the next time around, but maybe that opportunity is no longer available to them because they were exited. So I think it's really important to be able to start that transition to housing from the moment that they walk into the door, and just planning for that person's particular challenges and really trying to make sure they're successful in shelter so that they can obtain housing and stay long enough to be able to do that.
And to kind of echo on something that Cam had mentioned too, is that the policies and procedures are really important from a compassionate harm reduction view, right? So something that I always try to remember is that it's easier to keep someone housed than to term them and get somebody new housed. So just working with those folks and being understanding and compassionate and supportive is the approach that we take and that proves to work for long-term stability.
Hey, thank you for that. I think just Cam to kind of, yeah, touch on like, so really just like almost reframing the mission and daily practices. So, I mean, we are providing shelter, right? And that is essential and that is very important and it's life-saving, but also helping folks exit into something more permanent and into stability. So expectations, one, of course, defining what that looks like, right? Defining what housing case management is within your teams and within your organization as a whole, but then also setting those expectations with the staff and with those that we serve early on, right? This is who we are. And then even at intake, just making sure that is communicated and identified with those that we serve, with our families. I think one of the biggest things that we try to do, and it seems so little, but considering just the importance of it, is I know at intake we have, this is just a little tip, that we have these, we have 2 sign-up sheets for both of our case managers. And at intake, we ask that the families pick a date and time. It doesn't have to be for that week or the following week, so we can get folks to meet their case manager and do a brief orientation and either schedule, or if it's something that they're able to do, get their case management intake assessment complete. So just really that it's just the timing, like pulling people in right away, and because we don't want to, especially when you have a good amount of people in shelter, we don't want to miss an opportunity. So making sure that we're capturing these opportunities. I think also, just as folks do come in, we make sure that we are prioritizing rapid connections and housing resources. So trying to move quickly, having resources already in place. I know making sure that folks are in the coordinated entry system. That is big. It's not a requirement for us so they don't have families, individuals do not need to be in that system before entry. But when they do come in, one of the very first things our case managers will do is make sure that they are. And if they're not, that is a priority. And really also another piece of, and I think, Bob, you kind of touched on this, but kind of almost reducing barriers within our shelter space, like curfews and specific service requirements, because we don't want to hinder people's abilities to, we don't want to interfere with employment. We don't want to interfere with the housing search. We want to make sure that people have the ability to come in and out and do what they need to do to be successful and to work on their goals. I think strengthening partnerships within the community, that's a given. Landlord connects, creating those relationships, outreach teams, other service providers and partners. Those are very important. And then tracking your outcomes. I mean, and I know we'll probably touch on that a little bit more, but measuring those exits to permanent, looking at length of stay, looking at, return to homelessness, just so you can kind of build a guide and to identify where, what we can do better. And while they are in your program, just providing like flexible problem solving opportunities, like little things to help along the way, whether that's, hey, I don't know, they might need help with their cell phone bill, they're getting some assistance on that while they're here so that they're better able to find employment, or their storage. while they are here, just identifying the little tiny things that we can do to get them to the place where they can be successful when exiting, and hopefully while in maintaining as well.
Thank you all. And Cynthia, that reference to kind of being creative and problem solving leads really well into our next question. So, can you all talk about a time when, despite we know we have limited housing options, your team found a creative way to support someone's path to housing? And this time, Cynthia, if you could go first, and then we'll go to Bob.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking long and hard about this because I know at all of our emergency shelters and either in housing programs, rapid rehousing programs, that we have had times where, yeah, we most of the time we do have to be creative, especially when there's limited income or possibly prior evictions, and with the tight rental market and affordable housing and all that, we do have to be very creative. And whether that is, and a lot of it could be also like I think it could be family reunification. In my opinion, I think identifying family, or maybe even just friends or opportunities where folks can, it could be something as simple as the only reason I'm not with my family is because we can't afford to get to where we need to get to. So identifying these little resources that we may have to assist with that. Or it could be a roommate situation. One of the things I know that we've done is we had a single mom who actually worked as a nanny for a household, and the opportunity arose where there was a room available for her to reside there. And so she was also enrolled in a rapid rehousing, a VOA rapid rehousing program as well. So she had a good team working with her, and so that team worked with that individual to make sure, well, one, that the resident is going to be protected, right? That it's not tied into her employment, but also that there's a lease in place, so they were able to do all that. So that's an example of like, it's a creative way to kind of get folks into housing when those traditional pieces are just not in that moment going to be realistic, I guess.
Thanks, Cynthia. And Bob, I think we'll pass it over to you for.
Muted. Okay, I was muted. I apologize. So we actually reached out to our permanent supportive housing program manager for an example. So I'm just going to read what was provided. So in response to this question. All right. So despite limited housing options, our team supported one resident's path to housing by leaning heavily on creativity, persistence, and a deeply trauma-informed approach. The resident was living in our PSH program, which is permanent supportive housing program, and struggled with substance use and unmanaged schizophrenia. When intoxicated, her behavior often escalated. She lashed out at staff, damaged property, and had frequent conflicts with other residents. The situation reached a breaking point when she destroyed her apartment door for the third time using a bat and damaging the key card entry system. Keep in mind, this is a real scenario. Property management made it clear that eviction was imminent if something didn't change. At the same time, the resident's safety was increasingly at risk. She had already been assaulted by other residents in response to her behavior, and staff were deeply concerned that eviction would place her at significant risk of harm or even death on the streets. Compounding this, the client reported intense paranoia and distress related to her living environment. She frequently verbalized that the building and her neighbors made her feel scared and targeted. Hearing neighbors through shared walls was a major trigger, and her distrust for both the building and service providers made engagement extremely difficult. Our team had already attempted multiple interventions, including restorative justice efforts, behavioral health referrals, peer support, motivational interviewing, and substance use resources, but the client was largely unwilling or unable to engage in these efforts. Despite this, staff continued to work hard to maintain a positive relationship with her and support her in maintaining housing. Recognizing that traditional approaches were not working and the time was limited, and so we had to shift strategies. Instead of continuing to try to stabilize her in a setting that was clearly exasperating her symptoms, we pursued an alternative housing placement that better aligned with her needs. This required submitting a transfer request through MDHI, a process that involved extensive documentation. We had to strike a careful balance of honesty, conveying the severity of her behaviors while also framing them through a trauma informed and strength based lens that emphasized her vulnerability, resilience, and need for a more appropriate environment. The client was ultimately issued a housing voucher, but even then, significant barriers remained. Due to her distrust of providers, she refused to work with the housing navigator that she did not know. To maintain engagement, the program manager and case manager personally accompanied her to unit tours, providing a consistent and trusted presence. We also advocated strongly for a unit that did not share walls with other tenants, recognizing how critical this environmental factor was in reducing her triggers. Luckily, the voucher provided had townhome and condos the clients could tour. Simultaneously, we worked closely with the property manager at our property to negotiate additional time to prevent eviction while the transition was underway. And this required ongoing communication, transparency, and relationship management, particularly at the client's behavior, continued during this period. She also faced barriers related to her legal history, which further limited available housing options. Despite all of this, through the persistent advocacy and coordination with our team, we were able to secure a placement that aligned with her location preferences and environmental needs. For this client, maintaining housing required us to think what the best opportunities available look like, adapt our approach, and meet the client where she was, even when engagement was inconsistent and even volatile at times. Through that creativity and persistence and that approach that centered trauma-informed care and relationship building, our team was able to create a viable path for housing stability. The end.
The end. And I see a heart. That's an amazing story. And I think what a great, and I love, Bob, that you said this is a real story because that
It
really
is.
is kind of a through line of the tenacity and the problem solving and the what does this specific client, what does this person in front of us need in this moment, and how can we as a team.
Absolutely, and I think it speaks to like what we mentioned in the last one, the compassion of the team, the patience, the understanding of like, look, we deal with a challenging population, and and they're marginalized quite a bit because it could have been very understandable in a lot of ways to just kind of say, well, they did this to themselves type of an approach, but that's not what we did, right? Because that would have caused more harm than good. And so finding that balance between policies, procedures, safety of not only that particular client, but also the safety of the other clients in the building, taking all of that into account. We have a pretty rock star program manager and case management team to do that. So.
Great, I love it. We do have a question in the chat I'll read and for any of you to weigh in on. So what recommendations do you have of how to housing focused when your emergency shelter staff is only operational? Our overnight staff refers to our day program, which has housing coordinators, but that transition night to day doesn't always work, especially as we are not 24/7. I feel like we cannot sustain momentum on the housing focus as our overnight emergency shelter was not designed with integrated case management. And that's how our person asking the question inherited their program. So any insights from our panel?
Sorry, I'm just rereading it. So to be clear, there are housing coordinators that do work the program just during the day.
And Emily, if you're comfortable, please feel free to come off mute if you for a little discussion and follow up.
Yeah, for sure. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm just sharing this. We have kind of two programs in the same building, but they're not as integrated as I wish they were. So we have our overnight night-by-night emergency shelter, and then we have a housing navigation center and day shelter. But it's in the housing navigation center houses are essentially housing focused case management. So we're really losing that integration. And I'm trying to figure out, as I oversee the overnight programs, how we keep that housing focused at night when in my budget, I only can hire like, we have shelter associates essentially is their job title. They don't do any case management. They do like referral, they get people to bed, that kind of thing. So just looking for ways to make them more effective in housing focused.
Yeah, that's a great question, especially given that it's overnight only as the shelter operations. And there is historically, I think, a large disconnect between overnight staff and day staff in general, even when it is 24/7. I do think it's really important for that overnight staff to, again, to be assessing those exits that they might be involved in with anybody who is working towards a housing path, a housing journey. But I think something that we found at the Dolores Project was that our staff felt pretty disconnected and siloed from case management operations in general, and really just wanted more information in terms of where they were and what that looked like for them and for that guest. So what we started to do was send out regular updates and successes as well as when somebody does get housed. So we could kind of continue that reinforcement and hopefully to help them not feel so siloed and integrate a little bit further. In terms of tangible ways in focusing more towards being housing focused, that can be really difficult in the scope of operational staff to not have any role drift. But I would say to uh, to be really vital docs focused could be a good way to kind of integrate them into the process a little bit, where maybe that's part of the intake that they are asking individuals if they have their vital documents and then referring them over to a housing coordinator to later obtain those documents. And so maybe a referral system that works in both regards, like a maybe 2-3 pronged approach to communication in terms of keeping everybody in the loop. That is really challenging overall. So I think in general, I'd like to process it a little bit more. So I'll refer to Cynthia and Bob to see if they have any novel ideas.
Cam, I think that was great. I mean, I guess Emily, the question is, so when the overnight, what time does the overnight shelter begin operations every day?
So our
when the
overnight
staff.
shelter is 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. But then our
Oh,
daytime
okay.
operations are 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. only Monday through Friday.
Only Monday through Friday. Okay. And then so by the time the staff come in, it's like the staff obviously comes in a little bit before 7, right? And then your other staff is already gone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just thinking about, like, I know here, I think, and this may not affect your budget actually, but just thinking about possibly maybe even having case managers that work later in the day and possibly have your housing coordinators do like different schedules, like weekends and evenings possibly, to kind of help connect those dots a little bit. I know that's really helpful, and it's also helpful with our folks as well. So I think just maybe looking at the staffing and how that model looks like without bringing in extra dollars, maybe just realigning the schedule as well. I don't know if that kind of helps or not.
Yeah, that's was going to be my suggestion as well, Cynthia. I worked at a previous agency where we offered day shelter services as well as overnight sheltering separately. So what we did, because we were trying to stimulate movement and offer services to the days, because some people just come during the day, some people are there for emergency shelter, is that we actually had in that time frame between, so like between, like, let's say you said you close at 3:30, so like we would have the housing, we called them something else, but the housing residents or whatever schedule meetings with case managers for the day shift. And so or the overnight could schedule them, have access to their schedule, and then they could meet when the shelter, quote unquote, is closed, because you're just asking those folks probably to go outside in that time anyway. I would assume if it's anything like the place that I work, they're within blocks of your location. And so if they had an appointment, like what we would do, they would just come back in, meet with the staff during those closed times. And then that way it kind of puts it a little bit on the client as well to put a little bit of work into it. Like, okay, cool. It creates that ownership of like, well, I have a meeting with my case manager at 3:30 today, even though the shelter closes at 3:30, or let's say it's 4 o'clock or whatever the case is, right? And so that's what we did, and just adjusted those schedules accordingly. Because we didn't have our case managers come in until 9 anyway, because between 7 and 9 in the mornings is typically everybody's coming in, getting checked in. You're doing scannable services, doing breakfast, or at least this was our schedule, our workflow. Did that at 9 o'clock. They opened up the resource desk as far as like showers, laundry, things like that. And so by the time 9 o'clock got around, then our case managers were able to actually meet with people because they'd have those basic things done in the morning. The clients would. So that's what we did, and so that to kind of echo what Cynthia said, just kind of adjust a little bit one way or the other if it's possible.
Great. Thanks all, and thanks Emily for a great question. I have one more in the chat, and Kyle, I'll also invite you if you want to come off mute and expand or have any follow-up. You were asking about Bob's client. Is there a way for rural agencies to get help for similar clients, such as the story Bob shared, I think is what you're asking, but feel free to come off mute. All right. I think I might.
Yeah, so Bob actually messaged me with his email because I work in a rural agency, and sometimes locating resources that are available like cross county can be difficult at times. So I was gonna follow up with Bob and email him because we we I think we all run into clients where they can have some difficulties to help get placed, and sometimes there's resources out there, but they're not always available to cross county um, people. So I was hoping that all of us might have some resources to share about that route.
Thank you, Kyle, and thanks, Bob, for connecting. And I think that's a great point, Kyle, that sometimes to be able to do this problem solving and be creative, it's building those pathways and partnerships within your community. And so, yeah, I think that's a great question and something for all of us to think about. And Kyle, do you mind sharing what org you're with?
I'm with Rising Up in Fort Morgan.
Great. Thank you. That's just helpful for us as the Lyft team about reaching out and making sure we have follow-up as well. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna jump into another question for our lovely team. So you knew we were gonna ask about data, guys. Um, how do you use data, both qualitative and quantitative, to inform how your shelter operates and to improve outcomes? And for this one, Cam and Bob will go first, and then Cynthia.
Sure. I think it's really important to identify gaps in programming, but to identify those gaps, I think it's easy to say, okay, we could bolster this, we could work on this. Um, and in some ways it would be like throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks because the if you're not collecting data to identify those gaps, I you could really be missing something very critical in that workflow. Um, and the the resulting outcome could be a symptom of a different, larger kind of um, process that is currently in place. So I think it's really important to start with that data as your baseline, get that baseline, and then be able to really identify what is it that we want to capture? What is this capturing? My biggest pet peeve is just it capturing data for the sake of it and not really knowing what purpose it serves. So identifying that this has a purpose and that it's going to tell you the story that you want it to tell you. And so that quantitative data is going to be able to give you a little insight into trends and patterns and the ability to kind of see where where those gaps are. And then that qualitative data is more the why behind it. So you can get correlation, I think, from quantitative in a lot of ways. But the qualitative is going to give you more of that causation. And it's really important to be able to create systems that capture both. The other thing is, trying to balance what funders are looking for and what you want to track internally as well. So how do you optimize that? I would, go through every grant, everything that your funders want to see and to the benchmarks that they want you to reach, and also see where that overlaps with what you're tracking internally and how you can make sure that you're increasing efficiency in terms of that, because ultimately it is the frontline staff, it's the case managers, those front-facing positions that have to collect this data on your behalf, really, and the funder's behalf, and you have to make it feasible enough where they can do it in their day-to-day during their workflow, during a busy day when people are knocking at their door, they're doing case notes or whatever it may be, doing laundry in the shelter if it's operational. And so it has to be something too that is seamlessly built into the workflow of your frontline staff to be able to really be consistent and get that quality that you're looking for. So it's your storytelling piece, and it's the piece that's going to ultimately be used for future RFPs that come your way, future proposals, and even development, raising money, looking for different success stories, things like that. So it's, I think, really, really crucial that there's a constant reassessment of that data as well. And whatever cadence, you decide that to be, to really make sure that cadence is consistent, whether it's quarterly, it's monthly, but making sure that it's a constant reassessment, as a constant, evaluation of is this giving us what we want it to give? Or is it maybe two steps down the line and we're missing the root here, if that analogy kind of makes sense. um yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, not to add too much to what Cam said, but I've always kind of just you pilot and you pivot, right? You do assessments, you do surveys with guests with their engagement. You do surveys with staff as well on what's working, what isn't working, what their suggestions are. Because to echo what Cam said, that's your front line, right? And then the folks that you're trying to make the impact with, it's really important to get their information. and to get their opinion and buy-in, right? And things like that. So, but yeah, just pilot and pivot, especially with new programs. And again, like Cam said, just understanding the data that you're trying to capture for the funder as well as your own data, and just creating, if HMIS is a really good tool for collecting data, but if not, we create spreadsheets because they're easy and they can be live data, live tools that get updated once a week, whenever the class is, or the group is, or the case management meeting, or whatever that engagement time is. It gets updated on a regular basis. So at any given time, the person writing our grants can pull that data. Our director can pull that data. Our board members can pull that data, right? So it's all there and it's very transparent. So, but yeah, I mean, I always say these words wrong, so I'm not going to try to say them. Cam made it really easy. She's like, look, one of them is quality and the other one is the numbers, right? And so that's how I remember. The qualitative is the quality of the data. Quantitative is the numbers part of it. How many length of stay, right? Days of stay, people impacted, and the other one is like, how were they impacted? The hows and the whys, right? So.
Thanks, Cam and Bob. And Cynthia?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, wonderful job. I don't know how much I can add to that. I mean, definitely, intention with the collection of data, knowing that there are certain metrics that you do, either whether it's interagency or for your funder, that is the numbers piece. But again, you don't just collect data to collect data. There has to be an intention behind it, right? And to ensure that these numbers are being checked on, preferably a monthly basis, right? Not to wait. I think a lot of times not to wait until someone's requesting the information, but that your numbers are clean and coming through and that they do tell a story and are able to identify like certain trends, because numbers can show trends and you're able to input those in various ways to identify. And I think with qualitative data, I mean, that I think is very much program participant led. I think when we want to really look at the quality of a program, we do so not just with the numbers, but also getting that data from one-on-one conversations, feedback, listening sessions. I think that will really tell you on how the program is doing on that front line level, and to identify any holes or anything that we should be doing differently or that we are doing well. So I think, and gaps in services. I mean, how are we to know we need to know what is needed, right? And we need to know, and if we're missing something, that's definitely identified through those qualitative pieces. But I think, yeah, intentionality and review, like identifying things early on and knowing that your data is good as well.
Thanks all. And that through line of just creating some processes, tweaking them, reviewing things, and just being really consistent is so important. I'm going to transition us a little bit. So we know that sometimes when a shelter is opening or operating, there are neighbors that have concerns. And that's putting it nicely, right? So, what are some strategies that you all have used to ensure good relationships with the neighborhood and the community where your shelter is located? And for this one, Cynthia, we'll start with you and then move over to our friends at Dolores.
Sure. I think one of the biggest strategies is just being open and consistent in your communication and being front facing and being involved in your neighborhood meetings. Like one of the biggest thing is attending your neighborhood meetings, attending those events within your neighborhood, and safety meetings within your police district. I know there have been times in previous years where maybe going in with during your community meeting, maybe identifying that there needs to be a good neighbor agreement, but really allowing folks to know you and your programming and to offer, offer tours and offer presentations and just to let people know who you are, your program that is, and the agency and what we do in the community. So that's a big thing. Another thing, I think, just establishing expectations with our guests as well as they come through. Those that we serve, about being good neighbors, talking about, loitering, noise, and just respecting nearby properties, just like, you would in your own neighborhood, right? In your own home, you would do the same. A big thing that I've learned is that when there is, and I'm sure all of us have, but there is an opportunity in when you do receive concerns. When you have community concerns, this is an opportunity to respond promptly and constructively, right? So that could be like a good building, like a relationship building piece. But when you do have those concerns, respond. Respond in a timely manner, offer constructive solutions, offer, whatever is needed, even set up a meeting, but really have, just the response time is very, very essential in my opinion. Like if you're getting those, responding immediately is extremely important. And then just contributing, looking for ways in better contributing within your community, like doing maybe a trash cleanup, having folks sign up, including the staff, including our participants, having folks sign up and do an hour or two a day of just walking through your community and doing a cleanup, maybe a sidewalk cleanup. Those are some of the things that I feel like, these programs are doing wonderful things within the community, but sometimes our neighbors don't know that. Sometimes they don't see that. We have to show them, and we have to show off what we do, I guess.
Great, thank you. And Cam and Bob, over to y'all.
Yeah, this is a tough one. Cam and I talked about this yesterday. Both of our previous agencies that we worked for were very different than the Dolores Project. We're kind of spoiled here, and I'm going to knock on wood, but where our location is, we don't have encampments set up. We don't have trash outside of the building. We have a maintenance crew that keeps the outside of the building clean. We have so a lot of the things that both Cam and I have experienced, and a lot of other places probably have experienced with encampments and things like that, aren't really something that we are having to deal with on a regular basis where we're at now. Now, what I can say is that my last agency, it was in Aurora, Colorado, and literally right across the street was Denver. And so what we ran into was some problems with jurisdiction. So sometimes, if somebody would be discharged for one reason or another for a couple of days, a lot of times they would literally set up camp in another county, and technically another city, right across the street. And this would cause some problems and some complaints and some things like that. And it was an ongoing challenge with that. Plus, that location was amongst several businesses, which also is challenging. A little bit different challenges than currently where we're located here with the Dolores Project. We're mostly surrounded by residents and things like that. So yeah, I like what Cynthia had to say, and if that ever becomes an issue where we're at now, I'm sure that we'll have a strategic plan of how to meet with our neighbors and make sure everybody is understanding of what we do, educating them, education, right? We don't know what we don't know. And so, and a lot of our neighbors may not know what we do in this building. All they know is that there's EMTs here often, there's police here often, first responders here often, or whatever the case is. Who knows what they see and don't see? But yeah, it's definitely transparency and also, like Cynthia said, handling issues immediately in an effective way to show that, yeah, we don't have control over our population, but we're here to work with you on how to mitigate it afterwards.
I think that's the saying the quiet part out loud really is we don't have control over what our guests do and our residents do outside of the shelter. The best that we can do, and I think in ways that we've mitigated it, is at intake going over the community agreements, and the community agreements state that you are part of a community. We expect certain um, behavior outside as well as inside, whether, if it's on property and if it happens off property, that we don't bring it inside to the community. We also have a communal living workshop as well to help individuals navigate the congregate sheltering as well as being part of a larger community in general. But I would say, and I would really encourage providers to do, is to reach out to your district commander and set up those relationships with DPD, with whoever your law enforcement community is, and start to kind of bridge that gap between you know the advocacy for your guests and your residents, but also being able to say, like, if there is anything that we can do to help you as well, please come to us, please communicate that with us. And I think through those different avenues, the police are able to also, I think, advocate to a certain extent when we do get those complaints, because they're working directly with us, and they see that we're doing what we can to mitigate it as well. So I think in good faith effort, we're able to develop these relationships across different entities that are ultimately impacting the community as a whole.
Thank you all. And I heard uh, at least a dozen practical strategies in there and steps that our folks on the call today could think about taking in their own community and with their shelters. So thank you all. That was a lot of great info and some good ideas. Um, so shifting gears again, we had a recent session hosted by my wonderful colleague Cullen, talking a lot about staff retention. And that is a big topic, especially with emergency shelters or including emergency shelters. And so, what advice would you all give to partner organizations who want to increase staff retention and decrease burnout in an emergency shelter setting? And for this one, I'll go to Bob first.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, so obviously this, I've mentioned before, this isn't the first agency that I work for. What I can say about that I love about the Dolores Project is first of all, they have a really aggressive PTO plan. We actually even offer, after 5 years, we do 5 weeks of a paid sabbatical to allow folks for their self-care and to take those breaks, that they could even partner up with like a week of vacation to take a total of 6 weeks paid off if they need to or they choose to, things like that. We have EAP plans set up through our benefits program as well if they would like to do that. The other thing that we do is our staff is scheduled. So we do like much like VOA. We have 2 shelter staff on it at all times, and then we have a daytime shift supervisor, evening shift supervisor, and an overnight shift supervisor as well. So with that, what we have is we also have support, right? So our frontline staff, our resident assistant staff, have a supervisor that they could go to. From there, there's an operations manager, and then from there they can continue to go up to myself, to Cam, and then also to our CEO, who has an open door policy as well. So there's multiple layers of support if they want to talk. Or they need to discuss something or to deal with burnout or any of those things. We also, one of the things that I like that we do is that we have, they have a relief staff. So, and what that staff is they have a requirement of working 16 hours a month, right? But what they do is our full-time staff is able to go on for, like, for example, the month of April coming up, saying, hey, I need this shift off, and this shift off, or whatever the case is, that schedule is posted to the relief staff first. So those folks, so what happens with that is that your full-time staff doesn't feel obligated to have to work 60 hours this week because, John Doe needs time off for vacation or whatever the situation is. We have a relief staff that this might be their second job. This might be some of their third jobs. They might be going to school full time. And you know what? That fits within my school schedule. I can work those 8 hours overnight on XYZ days or whatever the case is. And so, we typically encourage the relief staff to be the first ones to do that. Now, our full time staff can end up picking up those shifts if they need to, and things like that. And so what I can also say is we are 24 hours a day. Okay. I believe that if I understand the numbers correctly, in the year 2025, we only paid $16,000 in overtime for the fiscal year. And the reason that a lot of that is able to be done is that that's a budgetary thing, which is great, but also it's because of the relief staff being willing to do that. And some of our relief staff have been here 10 plus years. One of the other things that I really was able to pick up on when I got here is that of our approximate 40-ish employees, I would say that there's maybe 5 of them, including myself, that have been here under 12 months. So maybe a little bit more because we just replaced a couple people or like just hired for a couple other positions. But 75% of the staff has been here for 12 months or longer. And I think a lot of that speaks to all of the support that they get while they're here, as well as the policies and procedures so they can feel safe while they're here, which is really important in sheltering, as well as the support and PTO availability. So.
Thanks, Bob. And I think Cynthia, you are up next. And also, raise your hand if this idea of a 5-week sabbatical sounds amazing.
Oh my gosh, I was just gonna say, we need to talk. No, wonderful. I mean, absolutely. So here's the thing. Everybody knows frontline with our shelter folks. I mean, flexibility in the hours worked is very difficult, right? Because you are an essential staff, you are an essential worker, you need to be here. But having a robust relief roster, on-call call-out system is definitely amazing. So I believe, just to kind of follow what you're saying, Bob, just that is such an essential piece to even allow for like folks do need to go on vacation, right? Our staff need that time off. There are going to be emergencies. They are going to need to step away. So having and allowing that our relief to have first bid on that is very important. So yeah, that's a definite thing. I think also just with a lot of this is kind of also easier said than done, but just prioritizing like manageable workloads, I guess, and having like clear roles and expectations. Like this is who we are as a program. This is what the role is, and these are the expectations. So that, I mean, a lot of our folks, especially when they're coming new and they're brand new to the agency, brand new to the program, that folks understand their role. I think that helps in the long run. But as you all know, like when you're on the front line, you're doing so much. So there's a lot going on. Ongoing, and then also just aligning. It's really important too, even because I know our housing CMs have the ability to really see when as program participants come in and they work with them closely and see them exit and see that achievement. I think it's also important for our folks on the front line to also see that. So having a big piece is having these team meetings with all the staff involved, talking through some of these successes, right, as a team, so that the staff at the front can see see the successes. And I think that's really important, especially because our folks are working with them through crisis and prevention and intervention, and there's just a lot going on. Or for them to see how far this family or this program participant has gone can really, really help, I think, with the day-to-day. To see that they are contributing to that end result. That's what I was trying to say. I think regular one-on-ones and supervision and emotional support, like in those, that is extremely essential. Having those meetings, open door policy, right? Where, hey, if there is something going on, please do come talk to me, to your supervisor. Building a safe space for folks to come in and just talk is extremely essential. Normalizing conversations of stress and burnout. It's okay. It's okay to feel stressed out. It's okay to feel that, but we need to talk about it. I think also we kind of talked about time off, encouraging time off, and modeling that as leaders. So I think a lot of times we say, do as I say, not as I do. Is that the saying? Where we need to model those behaviors as well, I think, as leaders, that so then we're showing that it's okay to take time for yourself when it's needed. Seeking staff feedback on decision making. Some stuff that will be required. See what your folks think about specific programmatic possibly changes, or even decisions on program participants. And I think I kind of brought, and then the last thing I want to say is, and this is something, and she's not on here, but Danelle Mir, our senior division director, my direct supervisor, this is something that she does wonderfully. And she always says we need to recognize and celebrate our successes, whether that's small wins or just like a major win, whatever win it is, that we need to celebrate those successes and to reinforce that impact that our staff have on the community and those that we serve. Sorry, I think I went over time.
Another good list from all of you of some good practical ideas. And Cynthia, I love that you said normalize having conversations around stress and burnout. Like you're not failing or doing a bad job or anything negative. If you're having those feelings, you're just normal, and being able to have those conversations and be transparent about them and share our own struggles is important. And yeah, all good information. That is it for our questions. I've been looking in the chat and I don't see any, but I want to invite any other questions before we do some wrap up. So we'll see what comes in. We have, last call. But I just want to thank our panelists today for sharing such good wisdom. I know there is much more that you could share if we weren't constrained by time. But thank you so much for the preparation you did and for sharing your time with us today. I think there were a lot of good things that folks can take, those nuggets that resonated, and implement some of those with their own programs. I am going to go ahead and launch our poll. I'm seeing some thank yous, but not questions. So I will go ahead and pull up our meeting poll. Again, a chance for a $5 gift card. It seems like folks complete them in the meeting more often than not, but we will send out the link as well. We'll give it about 3 or 4 minutes. Do folks see the poll?
Yep, we can see it.
Cool. Thank you. All right, it looks like responses are coming in. I'm going to share my final slide here while we're doing that, and just highlighting a couple of sessions that we have coming up. So we will get our slides and recording posted up on the website in the next day or two. And then going forward, we have kind of our next 3 sessions that will close out our programmatic excellence pillar. And then we will move, as we go into spring, move into our intentional inputs pillar. So just be sure to register for any of those that are upcoming. And we'll keep that poll up for a minute. And thank you not just to the panel, but for all of you for spending the time with us today. We know you're all busy and doing a million things, so we really appreciate y'all.